If you search on the internet, you're going to see a lot of stuff about asbestos health risks. And I don't want to be sensationalizing anything. I want to very clearly communicate what the actual risks of asbestos are and not over dramatize them. So I want to start with 5 undisputed facts about asbestos and human health. Now, the first fact is that there is no known safe level of exposure to asbestos. This does not mean that one exposure to asbestos could cause you to get sick. One brief exposure most likely will not. Medical science does not know exactly how many fibers or how much exposure to asbestos it takes to develop an illness. What they can agree upon is that you need a lot of exposure, typically an occupational exposure where you're working with it for hours and hours every day for a period of years. And that leads us to point 2. Asbestos is only dangerous if it is what they call friable, which means easily crumbled or dusty. Asbestos is harmful when it is airborne, when you breathe it in your lungs. That's how it hurts you. Touching it or handling it with proper respiratory protection, no problem, although you might get a mild dermatitis or a corn or something from it, but it's not a real health risk. Point 3, the medical community at large has no doubt whatsoever that breathing or swallowing asbestos can lead to lung cancer or mesothelioma. The medical community will admit they don't fully understand the mechanisms of exactly how it happens, but they know for sure that it does happen. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. Exposure to asbestos can lead to lung cancer or mesothelioma, but they still don't know how. Point number 4, there is a clear dose-response relationship between asbestos and health risks of asbestos. What that means is the greater the exposure, the more your risk. The higher your dose, the more likely you are to have a response. Typically, the kinds of clients that I represent and who developed asbestos-related illnesses worked with asbestos for years, or someone in their household did and they brought it home and they were breathing it for years. Again, the occasional brief exposure, it's not good for you, but it's probably not going to lead to any health risks. So if you're sitting here watching this thinking, gosh, the school I went to had asbestos in it and I changed the brakes on my 58 Chevy that had asbestos in them, you're probably okay. No guarantees, but there's nothing out there that would say this brief exposure is enough to cause an illness, just like cigarette smoking. If you smoke one cigarette, you're probably not going to get lung cancer. You could, but I wouldn't worry about it. And that takes us to the last point, which is that it can take up to 50 years, sometimes even longer, before an asbestos-related illness will develop. So if you're in your 60s or 70s now, if you're developing an asbestos-related illness, it could be because of asbestos exposure you had in your teens or 20s or later. And that's kind of why the asbestos industry was able to hide all of the dangers of their product for so long, is because of that latency period. You don't breathe asbestos on Monday and come down with an illness on Friday. It takes years.